This is Darknet Diaries. August 2012, New Jersey. A guy named Gary Bojzak was working for the construction and engineering firm Tilcon. Tilcon supplies crushed stone to construction sites. Like, for instance, they were the ones who paved the George Washington Bridge in New York when it needed to be repaved. To do work like this, they have a lot of company-owned vehicles. And you can imagine trucks delivering loads of crushed stone, asphalt trucks. Gary got to drive one of the company trucks. He was an engineer and went on site to examine the projects he was working on. He was assigned a red Ford F-150. Gary worked in the Newark, New Jersey area and would drive the truck around town to do work-related stuff. And at the time, he was working on a job site near the Newark Liberty Airport. Well, since Tilcon owned dozens of vehicles, they needed a way to keep track of them all. So they implemented a GPS-based tracking system on their vehicles. This way, dispatchers and bosses can know exactly where the trucks are and keep track of where everything is. Well, Gary knew that his boss kept tabs on the whereabouts of the company truck through some GPS-based tracking system installed on the vehicle. And Gary didn't like this. Something about being tracked bugged him. I don't know what exactly. Maybe his boss was on his case for taking too long of a lunch break, or maybe he was just trying to hide his tracks of where he was taking the truck, or maybe he was just sick and tired of being tracked all the time and felt like it was a violation of his privacy. Now, when I say he didn't like being tracked, he really didn't like it. Gary started thinking up surveillance and make his truck untrackable. He might have asked if there's any other truck that didn't have this feature so he could use that instead. Or he might have looked around the truck to find where the tracker is to see if he could somehow disable it without it looking like he tampered with it. I don't know all the scenarios he considered, but he eventually decided to get a signal jammer, a little device that he bought for under $100 that you can plug into the cigarette lighter of a truck, which could intercept and shield any GPS signals in and around the truck. This way, the truck wouldn't be trackable via GPS when the jammer is on. And also, the GPS tracker isn't touched and maybe just looks like it went on the fritz, like he went through a tunnel or something. He thought it was perfect and bought it and plugged it into the cigarette lighter of the truck. And right away, the signal jammer turned on, but was it working? It's hard to know exactly if it was actually jamming his signal. Maybe it was a way to test out this jammer or not. But he knew the best way to test this was just to leave it on and see what happens. So he left it plugged in doing his daily duties. Well, this little jammer was working, and his company had no idea where he was. This was a success. That same day, on August 3rd, 2012, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, reported there was interference with the Newark Airport's Ground-Based Augmentation System, or GBAS. For context, over the past few years, Newark had been testing a new system called SmartPath, a GPS satellite navigation system developed by Honeywell that was supposed to help pilots and airlines move more people and move them more safely. SmartPath operated within a certain radio frequency band that was restricted for public use. But on this particular Friday, the SmartPath signals were all screwed up. Something was jamming them and blocking them in and around the Newark Liberty International Airport. The airport contacted the FAA, which was scrambling to figure out what was going on with SmartPath's radio frequencies. It was Gary's not-so-clever cigarette lighter GPS jammer that was interrupting Newark Airport's communications. When he passed by the Newark Airport to do some work, the signals from his jammer obstructed the instruments used by air traffic controllers. Apparently, he must have been pretty close to the SmartPath system at the airport, or his jammer was just really powerful. Whatever the case, Gary had effectively taken the Newark Airport air traffic control system offline. The FAA alerted the FCC. See, the FCC is who regulates and polices who can use what radio frequencies in the US. The one Gary was shielding and jamming was not a frequency he was authorized to use. See, some frequencies are reserved, such as for police or firefighters. Those are certain frequencies that only emergency responders can broadcast on. Even if you had a radio that could broadcast on those channels, you wouldn't be legally allowed to do it. And in this case, Gary wasn't legally allowed to disrupt whatever frequency the airport's smart path system was using. So he was directly violating FCC regulations. So the FCC jumped into action to try to figure out what was going on. I mean, the Newark airport was on the fritz. This was a BFD. So this problem landed on the desk of an FCC agent who was in New York City. Soon as he saw this, he jumped in the car and started driving to the Newark airport, about 40 minutes away. On his way, he fired up his handheld direction-finding device. This would tell him where the offending signals were coming from and to help him pinpoint the source. Now, the drive from New York City to Newark Airport is about 40 minutes, and the communications were down for that whole time. So my theory is that Gary must have had his airport and wasn't just casually driving by. The agent arrived at the airport and got out his handheld frequency analyzer and was looking to see where the jamming signals were coming from. And this led him directly to a red F-150 pickup truck, Gary's company truck. The agent went up to the truck and asked Gary what his name is and if this is his truck. Gary identified himself and said it was his company truck. The agent asked Gary if he's using any kind of radio frequency jammer. Gary said, yeah, he is. The agent asked him to turn it off. Gary did, and lo and behold, the offending signals stopped immediately. The FCC had found their guy. Gary was cooperative with the FCC agent. He told him where he bought the jammer and even gave it to the agent. But when Gary's boss found out about this, he fired Gary. Not only was he tampering with the tracking system of a company vehicle, it looked really bad that a company vehicle was involved in taking down the Newark International Communications Channel. On top of being fired, the FCC charged Gary with a federal crime. They initially wanted to give him a fine of $42,500, but because he was cooperative, they lowered the fine to $32,000. So what's the lesson from all this? Well, it's surprising to me that such a cheap, off-the-shelf device can be so effective at disrupting airport communications. I mean, this was just an accident, but imagine if someone with malicious intent was behind it. Maybe someone who was mad at the airport and wanted to cause havoc. The U.S. has adversaries all over. If another nation wanted to sabotage key airports in the U.S., surely they could bring even more powerful equipment to cause even more damage. I don't know, but what's clear is our systems we rely on are not always as robust as we think, and can sometimes be taken down with a simple and cheap device. Thank you for listening, and before you go, I want to thank you for subscribing to the